The presentation hall was packed. Every seat was filled with students from different planets, their various biological forms creating a colorful and bizarre mix of shapes and colors. J1 stood at the front, his bioluminescent scales glowing with an intense mix of blue and green, a clear sign of extreme nervousness. His topic: human biological adaptability, a comprehensive study of skin modification and identity transformation. J1's hands shook slightly as he activated the holographic display. Images began to appear, humans with different makeup, tattoos, prosthetics, and body modifications. Each image was more shocking than the last. Humans, he began, his voice slightly trembling, are not a normal species. A few students chuckled. The professor raised an eyebrow. J1 continued, on my homeworld, a Crivarian's appearance is fixed from birth. Our scales tell our life story. They show our family, our achievements, our entire identity. But humans are different. The first image showed a human with dramatic makeup. In seconds, the same person looked completely different. Humans can change their entire external appearance in minutes, J1 explained. They use something called makeup to completely redesign their facial structure. It's not just decoration. It's a form of communication, a way of showing the world who they are, or who they want to be. More images appeared. Tattoos, hair color changes, costume transformations. But it gets worse, J1 said, his scales now pulsing with an intense blue of pure scientific excitement. Humans can modify their actual body structure. They have medical technologies that can replace body parts. They can add metal to their skin. They can reshape their entire physical form. A Jovian student in the back raised a tentacle. Isn't that dangerous? J1's response was immediate, apparently not to them. They view their body as something to be explored, changed, redesigned. The holographic display showed images of prosthetic limbs, of people with artificial hearts, of burn victims with reconstructed faces. Humans don't just survive, J1 said, his voice growing stronger. They remake themselves, constantly, continuously, without fear. Some students looked horrified. Others looked fascinated. The professor, Elena Rodriguez, watched with a slight smile. She knew exactly what J1 was experiencing, the shock of discovering how truly unique humans were. Consider this, J1 continued. A human can wake up looking one way. By evening, they can look completely different, not because of some biological process, but because they choose to. Images of Halloween costumes appeared, humans transforming into monsters, fantasy creatures, historical characters. They don't just change clothes, J1 said. They change entire identities. A Nexian student whispered something to her neighbor. Is he scared or impressed? The truth was, J1 was both. Humans are not just a species, he concluded. They are walking miracles of biological flexibility. They are not defined by their physical appearance. They are defined by something, harder to understand, something inside them. His final slide showed a human without makeup, then with makeup, then in a complete costume. The transformation was shocking. For a moment, the presentation hall was completely silent. Then, slowly, applause began to build. The professor walked up to J1. Interesting presentation, she said. I think you're starting to understand humans. J1's scales pulsed with a mix of colors, blue of shock, green of nervousness, and a new color, a soft, warm orange of understanding. I'm not sure I'll ever fully understand humans, he replied, but I'm beginning to appreciate how amazing they are. As he left the stage, students stared, some in horror, some in fascination, but all of them were thinking the same thing. Humans were definitely not a normal species. The next day, J1 approached his human lab partner with a mixture of terror and scientific curiosity. Hyun-Ki was arranging laboratory equipment, his movements casual and relaxed. J1's bioluminescent scales flickered between blue and green, a clear sign of his extreme nervous state. "Hyun-ki," J1 began, his voice slightly higher than usual. "I need to ask you something very important about humans." Hyun-ki looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Sure. What's on your mind?" J1 took a deep breath. His translation device was fully functional this time, but he still feared something might get lost in communication. "Is it true that humans can shed their skin?" To his surprise, Hyun-ki burst out laughing. "Shed our skin? Not exactly. But we do change our appearance in ways that might seem totally crazy to other species." Before J1 could respond, Hyun-ki pulled out a small handheld device, a holographic projector. Images began to float between them. J1's scales pulsed with an intense blue of pure shock. The first image showed a human with pale skin and dark makeup around the eyes. The next image of the same person looked completely different: lighter makeup, different hair color, entirely new facial appearance. "This is called makeup," Hyun-ki explained. "We can completely change how we look using these special colored substances." J1's voice trembled. "But why?" Hyun-ki shrugged. "Sometimes for fun. Sometimes to look different for a special event. Sometimes to express ourselves." More images appeared. Humans with bright blue hair. Humans with temporary art on their skin. Humans wearing elaborate costumes that transformed their entire appearance. Each image made J1 more confused and terrified. "There's more," Hyun-ki continued, seemingly enjoying J1's reaction. "We can change our hair color, add decorations to our skin, change our clothes to look totally different." J1's mind was spinning. On his homeworld, a Crivarian's appearance was fixed from birth. Their bioluminescent scales told a story of their life, their family, their achievements. The idea of voluntarily changing one's appearance was not just strange. It was unthinkable. "Do you feel pain when you change?" J1 asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. Hyun-ki laughed again. "Pain? No. It's like changing clothes. Some humans even do more permanent changes." He showed images of tattoos, permanent markings on the skin, piercings that changed the body's appearance, surgical modifications that altered body shape. J1 felt dizzy. His scales were now pulsing rapidly, shifting between blue, green, and a pale, nervous white. "How do you know who you are if you can change so easily?" Hyun-ki's expression softened. "Our appearance isn't who we are. It's just a way of showing the world something about ourselves." The lab around them continued to hum with scientific equipment. Other students worked nearby, completely unaware of the existential crisis happening between J1 and Hyun-ki. "Let me show you something else," Hyun-ki said. He pulled up images of Halloween, a human celebration where people dressed up as completely different creatures. J1's mind was near breaking point. Humans could become anything. A person could look like a monster one moment, a professional worker the next, then a fantasy creature in the evening. It was like they were not just changing clothes, but changing entire identities. "I need to sit down," J1 mumbled. Hyun-ki handed him a glass of water. "You okay?" J1's scales were now a solid, pale white, a Crivarian response to extreme shock and confusion. "Humans are terrifying," he whispered. Hyun-ki just smiled. "Welcome to understanding humans," he said. "We're a bit complicated." An understatement, J1 thought. The most massive understatement in the entire universe. As the lab continued its work around them, J1 realized his understanding of biology, identity, and appearance would never be the same again. The Sunspire Academy's archives were not what J1 expected. Instead of a dusty, quiet room filled with ancient data crystals, it was a bright, bustling space with holographic displays and interactive research stations. Soft blue and green lighting created a calming atmosphere, but J1 felt anything but calm. His hand shook slightly as he approached the main research terminal. The massive screen flickered to life, responding to his unique bioluminescent signature. J1 took a deep breath and began his investigation into the most disturbing concept he had ever encountered: human skin shedding. Search parameters, he muttered to himself. Human external modification. Skin changing. Appearance alteration. The terminal hummed. Thousands of research documents, cultural records, and scientific papers began to populate the screen. J1's eyes widened with each new piece of information. First, he discovered something called makeup. The images were mind-boggling. Humans could completely change the color and texture of their facial skin using strange colored powders and liquids. One moment, a human would look one way, and in the next moment, totally different. J1's scales pulsed with a nervous green-blue light. "This cannot be real," he whispered to himself. But the evidence kept coming. He found entire databases dedicated to something called costume makeup and special effects. Humans could make themselves look like entirely different creatures. They could create fake wounds, change skin color, add artificial texture. It was like they were walking, talking shapeshifters. A particularly terrifying document caught his attention. It was a cultural history of human body modification. J1 learned about tattoos, permanent markings humans could add to their skin. Some humans changed their entire skin color through a process called tanning. Others used something called prosthetics to add or remove body parts. His breathing became rapid. On his homeworld, such modifications would be unthinkable. Crivarians were born with their protective scales, each one a perfect, unchanging part of their body. The idea of voluntarily changing one's external appearance was not just strange, it was fundamentally horrifying. J1's hands moved across the terminal, downloading every piece of information he could find. His personal data crystal began to fill with images and documents about human skin modification. Just then, a notification blinked on his communication device. It was a quantum communication link to his family back on the Krigarian homeworld. Without thinking, he activated the call. His mother's luminescent form appeared in a holographic projection. Her scales were a deep, rich blue, a sign of her elder status and wisdom. "J1, she said, her voice calm and measured. "You look troubled." He took a deep breath. How could he explain this to her? How could he describe the terror he was experiencing? "Mother," he began, his voice trembling. "I've discovered something about humans. They can change their skin." His mother's scales flickered with confusion. The translation system worked perfectly this time, but the concept was so alien that it took her a moment to process. "Explain," she said simply. J1 began to show her the images he had found. Makeup transformations, costume changes, tattoos, hair color modifications. Each image made his mother's scales pulse with a mix of fascination and horror. "These creatures," his mother said slowly, "they are not fixed. Their external appearance is flexible." "Exactly," J1 exclaimed. "It's like they're not even committed to how they look. They change everything. Skin color, texture, added decorations. It's like they have no biological stability." His mother looked concerned. "This sounds like a significant evolutionary disadvantage. How can a species survive if its external protection is so unreliable?" J1 had no answer. His research had only deepened his confusion and fear. As the communication ended, J1 returned to the research terminal. He knew he was far from understanding the full complexity of human skin modification. But one thing was certain: he would not rest until he understood how these strange creatures could survive with such an unpredictable external layer. Little did he know, his journey of discovery was just beginning. The library's holographic research section was nearly empty. Most students were finishing their evening meal or preparing for tomorrow's classes. But J1 sat alone, surrounded by floating screens of information about human biology. His bioluminescent scales had settled into a soft, thoughtful blue. Gone was the frantic green and white of pure terror. Now, he was simply curious. A new search parameter blinked on his screen: human skin shedding. Literal versus metaphorical. J1 had been obsessed with this topic since that first xenobiology class. Did humans actually shed their skin like some Earth reptiles? Or was it something else entirely? The first few research documents confirmed his worst fears and then completely destroyed them. Humans did not literally shed their entire skin in one piece like a snake. The term skin shedding was mostly metaphorical. It referred to something much more complex: personal growth, emotional change, life transformation. Wait, J1 whispered to himself. What does that mean? More research appeared. Humans use the phrase shedding old skin to talk about personal change, letting go of past experiences, growing as a person, becoming something new. It was not a physical process. It was an emotional and psychological journey. J1's scales began to pulse with a mix of colors, confusion, wonder, and a growing understanding. Humans constantly talked about changing, not just their physical appearance, but their entire way of thinking, their beliefs, their understanding of the world. A document about human psychology caught his attention. It explained how humans viewed personal growth. They believed that staying the same was not living. Growth meant changing, adapting, learning. This is crazy, J1 muttered. But his scales were now a warm, interested orange. He discovered more interesting facts. Humans had entire industries dedicated to personal development. Books about changing your life, courses about personal growth, therapies to help people become better versions of themselves. On his home world, a Crivarian's path was mostly fixed. Your scales told your story from birth. Your family, your achievements, your potential, all were visible from the moment you were born. But humans could rewrite their own story. A holographic image appeared. It showed a human at different life stages. Each image was slightly different, not just in appearance, but in posture, in energy, in the look in their eyes. They're not changing skin, J1 realized. They're changing themselves. More research revealed cultural practices. Humans had rituals for marking personal change, coming-of-age ceremonies, graduation celebrations, career shifts. Each was a moment of transformation. Tattoos were not just decorations. They were maps of personal journey. Makeup was not just about looking different. It was about expressing inner feelings. J1's earlier terror began to transform. What he had seen as terrifying chaos was actually something beautiful. Humans were not shapeshifters. They were explorers of their own potential. A small notification blinked. It was a message from his human lab partner, Hyun-ki. Found anything interesting? The message read. J1's fingers moved across the holographic keyboard. Humans are amazing. He typed back. His scales were now a brilliant, confident blue, the color of new understanding. The universe, he realized, was far more wonderful than he had ever imagined. Humans were not changing their skin. They were growing, evolving, becoming. And for the first time, J1 was truly excited to learn more. The Xenopsychology Counseling Center was nothing like J1 expected. Instead of a sterile, cold room, it was warm and inviting. Soft colors shifted on the walls. Comfortable chairs that seemed to adapt to each species' unique body shape waited invitingly. Min Seo, the counselor, was human. This fact alone made J1 nervous. She sat across from him, her posture relaxed, her eyes kind and intelligent. So, Min Seo began, you're struggling with understanding human adaptability. J1's bioluminescent scales flickered between nervous green and anxious blue. Struggling is an understatement, he said. I'm terrified. Min Seo smiled. It was a gentle smile, one that seemed to understand more than her words suggested. Tell me why, she prompted. The words came tumbling out. J1 explained everything he had learned. How humans could change their appearance, how they could modify their bodies, how they seemed to have no fixed identity. On my world, he said, his voice trembling, we are born with our scales. They tell our entire life story. A Crevarian's identity is fixed, permanent, unchanging. He looked down at his own glowing scales. But humans are chaos. Min Seo listened carefully. She didn't interrupt. She didn't laugh. She simply listened. I've seen humans change their entire appearance in minutes. J1 continued. Makeup, costumes, body modifications. It's like they're not even committed to who they are. The counselor leaned forward slightly. May I share something with you? She asked. J1 nodded, his scales now a mix of curiosity and fear. Humans change their appearance. Min Seo explained, not because they lack identity, but because identity is complex. It's not about how we look on the outside. It's about who we are inside. She pulled up a holographic image. It showed the same human in different appearances. Professional clothes, casual clothes, a costume, makeup, no makeup. See these? She asked. These are all the same person. The appearance changes, but the core, who they are, remains the same. J1's scales pulsed with confusion. But how can you know who someone is if they keep changing? Min Seo smiled. Because true identity isn't about external appearance. It's about values, feelings, experiences, memories. She showed him more images. Humans with prosthetic limbs. Humans who had changed their body through medical procedures. Humans with tattoos that told stories of their life. Every change, she explained, is a form of communication, a way of showing the world something about themselves. J1's breathing slowed. His scales began to settle into a more stable color, a soft, thoughtful blue. Humans are not changing because they lack identity. Min Seo continued. They are changing because identity is a journey, not a fixed point. She shared a story about human cultures, how some used body modifications to mark important life events, how tattoos could tell a person's entire life story, how changing appearance could be a form of healing, of self-expression, of understanding oneself. But isn't that dangerous? J1 asked, changing so much. Min Seo laughed. It was a warm, kind laugh. Change is how we grow, she said simply. Humans believe that if you're not growing, you're dying. For J1, something began to shift. His understanding of identity, of appearance, of what it meant to be a living being. All of it was changing. So, he said slowly, changing appearance isn't about losing yourself. It's about finding yourself. Min Seo nodded. Exactly. As the counseling session ended, J1's scales were no longer frantically changing colors. They had settled into a deep, thoughtful blue, the color of understanding. Humans were still terrifying, he thought. But maybe, just maybe, they were also beautiful in their complexity. The universe, he realized, was far more wonderful than he had ever imagined. The Academy's medical library became J1's new obsession. He spent hours diving deeper into human modification technologies, his bioluminescent scales flickering with a mix of horror and fascination. Medical textbooks revealed worlds more terrifying than his initial discoveries. Humans could actually replace entire sections of their body. Skin grafts allowed them to cover wounds with new skin. Plastic surgery could reshape body parts like some kind of living sculpture. Each page made J1 more convinced that humans were not just a species, they were walking miracles of biological chaos. He discovered something called prosthetic limbs, artificial body parts that could replace missing ones. On his homeworld, a lost limb was a permanent disability. But humans, they simply created a new one. Some prosthetics were even more advanced than the original body part. This is impossible, J1 muttered to himself, his translator device picking up his whispered words. The medical database showed image after image of human modifications. Burn victims with reconstructed faces, people with artificial hearts, individuals with hearing devices integrated into their bodies. It was like humans were constantly rebuilding themselves, piece by piece. A holographic diagram caught his attention. It showed the layers of human skin, how it could heal, regenerate, and adapt. Compared to his own species' rigid scale structure, human skin was incredibly complex. It could change color slightly with temperature. It could grow hair in different patterns. It could even show emotional states through something called blushing. J1's research took a darker turn when he found medical records about more extreme modifications. Some humans changed their entire body shape through surgical procedures. Others added metal pieces to their body. Piercings, implants, decorative modifications that served no obvious survival purpose. Why? He whispered to himself. Why would a species do this to themselves? His mind raced with possibilities. Was this some kind of evolutionary defense mechanism? A way to confuse predators? Or was it something more complex? A biological expression of individual identity? The library's AI assistant noticed his prolonged research. "Would you like more information about human adaptive technologies?" it asked. J1 nearly jumped out of his scales. "Yes," he responded quickly. The AI began to explain human medical technologies, organ transplants, genetic therapies, artificial intelligence integrated with human biology. Each explanation made J1 more confused and more impressed. He found a particularly disturbing section about cosmetic surgeries. Humans could literally reshape their facial structure, change the size of their nose, adjust the shape of their eyes, modify their body's proportions. It was like they viewed their body as a piece of art to be constantly redesigned. A small notification blinked on his research terminal. It was a message from his academic advisor, warning him about spending too much time on a single research topic. But J1 couldn't stop. His scales were now a constant swirl of blue and green, colors representing intense concentration and slight terror. He discovered tattoos were more than just decorations. Some cultures used them to tell stories. Some used them to mark important life events. Others used them as a form of personal expression. Humans were literally writing their life stories on their own skin. Piercings were another mystery. Small pieces of metal inserted through skin for no apparent survival reason. Sometimes for decoration. Sometimes for cultural significance. Sometimes just because an individual thought it looked interesting. By the time the library's closing alarm sounded, J1 had downloaded over 500 research documents about human body modification. His personal data crystal was nearly full. "Humans are not a species," he muttered to himself. "They are walking miracles of biological chaos." As he left the library, his scales continued their nervous dance of blue and green. One thing was certain. He would never look at humans the same way again. The universe, he realized, was far more complex than he had ever imagined. The presentation hall was packed. Students from 100 different planets sat quietly, waiting for J1's final research presentation. Professor Elena Rodriguez watched from the back of the room, a small smile playing on her lips. She knew exactly what was coming. J1 stood at the podium, his bioluminescent scales glowing with a confident, brilliant blue. Gone was the nervous creature who had first discovered human skin shedding. Now he was a scholar, an explorer of understanding. "Humans are not what they appear to be," he began. His translator device carried his words clearly to every corner of the hall. The holographic display behind him showed a series of images. Humans in different appearances. Humans changing. Humans growing. "When I first learned about human adaptability, I was terrified," J1 continued. "I thought humans were chaotic, unstable, impossible to understand." Soft laughter rippled through the audience. Many alien students remembered their first encounters with humans. "But humans are not changing their skin," J1 explained. "They are writing their story." More images appeared. A child becoming an adult. Someone recovering from an injury. A person changing careers. Each image showed transformation. "On my homeworld, Equivarian scales tell their entire life story from birth," he said. "We are fixed, permanent, unchanging." He paused, letting the contrast sink in. "Humans are different. They believe that staying the same is not living. Growth means changing, adapting, learning. The holographic display showed humans with prosthetic limbs achieving amazing things, humans with tattoos telling complex life stories, humans changing appearance to express inner feelings. What I first saw as terror, J1 said, I now see as something beautiful. Humans are not shapeshifters. They are explorers of their own potential. More images appeared. Makeup is a form of expression. Clothing is a way of telling a story. Body modifications as marks of personal journey. They don't just change how they look, J1 explained. They change how they think, how they understand the world, how they grow. The audience was completely silent now. Listening. Understanding. Humans have entire industries dedicated to personal development, he continued. Books about changing your life. Courses about becoming better. Therapies to help people grow. His scales pulsed with a warm golden orange, the color of excitement and wonder. They view their body not as a fixed thing, but as a canvas, a way of telling their story, of showing their journey. The final images showed humans at different life stages, each image different, but something always remained the same, the spark in their eyes, the sense of potential, of becoming. Humans are not changing their skin, J1 said, his voice strong and clear. They are evolving, growing, becoming. As he finished, the presentation hall erupted in applause. Students from different planets stood up, clapping, cheering. Professor Rodriguez walked to the stage. Excellent presentation, she said quietly. J1's scales glowed with pride. At the back of the hall, Hyun-Ki gave a quiet thumbs up, the human who had first helped J1 understand. In the small emergency kit at J1's side, the one he had once prepared to detect human skin-changing events, sat a single makeup brush, a reminder of his journey of understanding. The universe, J1 now knew, was not about staying the same. It was about growing, about becoming, about writing your own story. His scales glowed with a brilliant, confident blue, the color of new understanding, the color of hope, the color of endless possibility. The lecture hall buzzed with the soft hum of translation devices and the quiet shuffling of students from across the galaxy. Sunspire Interstellar Academy's Xenobiology classroom was a marvel of modern educational design. Transparent walls that shifted colors, holographic displays that danced with biological diagrams, and seats that adjusted to each student's unique physiological needs. J1 shifted uncomfortably in his seat. As a Crevarian exchange student, he looked distinctly different from the other students. His body was covered in a delicate network of bioluminescent scales that softly pulsed with a pale blue light. These scales were permanent, unchanging, a living testament to his species' evolutionary path. Each scale told a story of adaptation, of survival in the harsh crystalline forests of his home world. Professor Elena Rodriguez stood at the front of the classroom. She was human, a species that constantly fascinated and confused J1. Humans seemed to exist in a state of perpetual contradiction. They were simultaneously fragile and incredibly resilient, primitive yet technologically advanced, rigid in some ways and astonishingly flexible in others. Today, the professor began, her voice clear and engaging. We'll be discussing adaptive species modifications. Each species in the universe has developed unique ways of surviving and thriving in their specific environment. J1 activated his personal translation device, a small metallic disc attached to his upper left shoulder. The device hummed to life, translating the professor's words directly into his native Crevarian language. He leaned forward, his luminescent scales casting a soft blue glow on the desk around him. The holographic display flickered to life, showing various species and their adaptive mechanisms. A Terran desert lizard appeared, demonstrating its ability to change color. A Jovian gas swimmer showed how it could compress its body to survive extreme pressures. Then, the image shifted to show a human, A student in the back of the classroom raised his hand. Speaking of adaptations, he said casually, humans are pretty weird about shedding their skin, you know. J1's translation device suddenly crackled. The words shedding their skin repeated in a garbled mix of sounds that made no sense. He tapped the device, thinking it was malfunctioning. The human student continued, seemingly unaware of J1's confusion. Like, we change our entire external appearance all the time. Makeup, clothes, hair color. We're basically walking skin changers. For a moment, the classroom fell silent. Most of the alien students looked equally confused. But J1 felt a particular sense of horror creeping up his spine. His scales, beautiful, permanent, unchanging, pulsed with a nervous blue-green light. Did he just say humans can shed their skin? J1 whispered to his lab partner, a Nexian student named Reiki. Reiki looked equally perplexed. I'm not sure. My translator seems to be having issues too. Professor Rodriguez noticed the confused looks. Is everything all right? She asked, her eyes scanning the room. J1's hand trembled slightly. In his mind, he was imagining humans literally peeling off their external layer like some kind of terrifying shape-shifting nightmare creature. The image was both fascinating and deeply disturbing. The human student who had made the original comment seemed oblivious to the growing tension. He was scrolling through something on his holographic tablet, occasionally chuckling to himself. J1's breathing became slightly rapid. Shedding skin, changing appearance. These concepts were completely alien to his species. Krigarians were born with their protective scales, which remained unchanged throughout their entire lifetime. The very idea of voluntarily altering one's external appearance was not just strange, it was fundamentally impossible in his understanding of biology. As the lecture continued, J1 found himself unable to concentrate. His mind raced with questions. How did humans shed their skin? Was it painful, dangerous, some kind of terrible medical condition? Or was it a voluntary process? One thing was certain. He needed to investigate this further. The horror and fascination growing in his mind would not let him rest until he understood exactly what this human skin-shedding business was all about. Little did J1 know, this was just the beginning of a discovery that would challenge everything he thought he knew about biological adaptation. The Student Recreation Center at Sunspire Academy was a marvel of interstellar design. Different gravity zones, spaces that adjusted to various atmospheric needs, holographic entertainment systems. But today, it was just a place where J1 was learning something completely unexpected. Hyun-Ki sat across from him, showing him something called a photo album, an old-fashioned digital collection of human memories. Look, Hyun-Ki said, this is me when I was younger. J1's bioluminescent scales pulsed with curiosity. The images showed the same human, but dramatically different. A child, a teenager, an adult. Each image told a different story. Humans change so much, J1 said, his voice a mix of wonder and lingering confusion. Hyun-Ki laughed. We're not changing. We're growing. More images appeared. Hyun-Ki with different hairstyles, different clothes, different expressions. But something remained the same, the look in his eyes, a spark of something unchanging. On my world, J1 explained, a Krivarian looks the same from birth. Our scales tell our entire life story. But humans, you're different every time I see you. Other students from various species gathered around. They were all fascinated by this cultural exchange. Hyun-Ki pulled out something called a makeup kit. With practiced movements, he began to demonstrate different looks. Professional, casual, artistic. Each transformation took just minutes. This is how we express ourselves, Hyun-Ki said. It's not about hiding. It's about showing different parts of who we are. J1's scales were now a soft, interested blue. The terror was completely gone. Now, there was only curiosity. A Nexian student nearby leaned in. Humans are weird, she whispered to J1. Wonderfully weird, J1 corrected her. Hyun-ki showed more images. Humans with prosthetic limbs competing in sports. Humans who had changed their body through medical procedures. Humans with tattoos that told complex life stories. We believe in becoming, Hyun-ki explained, not just existing. J1 began to understand. Humans didn't see their body as a fixed thing. They saw it as a canvas, a way of telling their story, of showing their journey. More students gathered. The recreation center became a small celebration of human adaptability. Hyun-ki demonstrated how makeup could express emotions, how clothing could tell a story, how changing appearance was a form of communication. But isn't it exhausting? J1 asked. Changing so much. Hyun-ki smiled. Growing is never exhausting, he said. Staying the same is. The other students listened, fascinated. Humans were becoming less of a mystery and more of a wonder. J1's scales were now a brilliant, confident blue, the color of understanding, the color of growth. He thought about his own species. Crivarians were beautiful. Their scales were perfect, unchanging. But humans were something else entirely. You're not changing your skin, J1 said slowly. You're writing your story. Hyun-ki nodded. Exactly. As the demonstration continued, more students joined, asking questions, learning, understanding. The recreation center had become more than just a place to relax. It was a classroom, a place of cultural exchange, a place of understanding. J1 realized something important. Difference was not something to fear, it was something to celebrate. His scales glowed with a new color, a warm golden orange of pure excitement and wonder. The universe, he thought, was an amazing place, and humans were its most fascinating explorers.